Welcome to The Kingstonian, a podcast that profiles individuals who are passionate about what they do for a living, about what organization they belong to, or simply passionate about the community they are a part of. Hello there, and welcome. My name is Dave Cunningham. What do the River Mill, Clark's by the Bay, Clark's on King, Aqua, Terra, and the Bayview Farm Restaurant have in common? Clark Day, and he is our guest in this episode. Clark, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here.
You have spent some 35 years operating, consulting with various restaurants around town. But what I'd like to do is go back to the beginning and how you got this passion for food and cooking. Where did it all start?
Well, that's kind of an interesting statement because I think you build on everything. I mean, I grew up in Germany and Switzerland, and I remember Sundays could be in any country. We lived in Germany for 5 years and Switzerland for 2. And we could be in France, we could be in Austria, we could be in Italy, and we go for a Sunday drive and have a meal. So that was a really fond memory. And I know that even from a young child, I was pretty picky. And used to drive my parents crazy, but I guess it evolved into something worthwhile.
How did it go from food to cooking?
Years ago, I ended up in Edmonton, and I was on the floor working as a server. I worked for Alberta Government Health at the same time and was working part-time as a server at this restaurant. And it was the best restaurant in the city at the time, and Wayne Gretzky, all the Oilers, all the oil people, that type of thing, tableside service, a big grand piano, tuxedos, the whole schmeal. And I worked there, and I just really enjoyed it. The passion that we were talking about. If something was wrong, I would fix it. And the owner, manager at the time, he and I got to know each other quite well. And when he was building another restaurant, he recommended to his partners that I take over as general manager. Now you have to remember, in '82, this restaurant was doing $2.5 million. So it wasn't just a small restaurant. So it was quite a jump from part-time server to general manager. And I had 80 staff. And I realized that if I didn't know the kitchen as well as I knew the floor, that I would be held ransom. And so I got involved, and I worked with Italian, French, Swiss, German, all kinds of different chefs and saw different styles. And again, I learned through watching. Mm-hmm. So it worked out well that way. And the one thing I do have is my taste buds go right to my brain. So
and stay there.
I'm still there. So I can put things together in my head, which is one of those nice things. I mean, you either seem to be able to do it or not. Mm-hmm. So it evolved from that, and then one restaurant after another, it just kept evolving. Any
formal training as a chef?
No.
You just
and I actually don't even look for that when I hire chefs. A lot of chefs that have had formal training sometimes get blinded. They put blinders on them that you can't do this, you can't do that. I look for people that are passionate about what they do and have the ability to put together food. Just do it. I mean, everybody gets so terrified. We were talking earlier about the food channel, etc. And that's one problem I have, is the food channel scares people. Well, I can't do that. Well, play around with food. Try things. Try spices. It's not like you're rebuilding the carburetor of a Mercedes-Benz. If it doesn't go right, then it's $10 or $15, but you've learned something. Mm-hmm. And in your brain, you've decided that, okay, coriander and, strawberry jam don't work. Actually, they probably would work, but,
there must be a way.
All those things that just, you sort of are able to sort of identify over the time. And a lot of mistakes I've made have turned out to be good mistakes. Mm-hmm. I've learned something from it or created a new dish because of it. I have a real problem with recipes too, to be quite honest, because a lot of people will go, okay, I need an avocado, I need this, I need that, and they go shopping and it's not avocado season, and all they can find are little rocks. I'd much prefer people to go to the store and go, oh, look at that roast, look at that pork loin, look at those tomatoes, look at that avocado, look at the bok choy, look at the, whatever, and sort of say, now I'm going to make something with all these great ingredients.
Mm-hmm. So you mix and match when you're in the store.
Exactly.
While we are on the Food Network, one final question on that part of your life. The business of the various programs that are available, do you have a favorite?
I always love the ones where you go to a country and you're involved in the country and in the geography and in the history and in the food.
Like Anthony Bourdain.
Anthony Bourdain was a great example, and Dolce Vita, I forget what his name was, but he'll go to Italy and he'll be cooking on the side of the road, but you'll be experiencing the country and actually the culture that goes with that food, rather than just somebody pulling peanut butter and chicken thighs and baby marshmallows out of the cupboard.
Mm-hmm. When you were talking about going to different countries, it brings to mind a trip that we took in the fall to Central America. And I am trying to remember what country it was, and I can't, but it's one of the countries in Central America, and we were taking a bus ride from the ship to a particular destination, but we were going down a long country road. And there were lots of little food stands that people had put up just outside their houses. And to get people to stop and sample, during the night, they would put bumps in the road so that the buses would have to slow down and stop. And maybe that would force them to actually stop and get people on the bus to sample the food that was being created right then and there, which I thought was kind of cool.
I think that's amazing, and this is it. People are very good at trying to sort of make an income for themselves and their families, mm-hmm. especially in Central America. Mm-hmm. So, were you able to stop and?
Not on the road. We stopped at various places that were planned as part of the trip, but I was just interested in watching these little stands along the way that people had set up.
Well, listen, it's some of the programs, the food programs now that are all about street food. Mm-hmm. It's kind of interesting.
To see what people put together.
Exactly.
Let's come back to Kingston, talk about the restaurants that you have been affiliated with here in town over the years. Interested to know what you liked about a particular restaurant. So let's start with the River Mill.
Well, the River Mill, of course, was the start of it all. So it has a special part in your heart. We opened up down there in '85. And that was when the River Mill was just actually starting. The woolen mill was actually starting mm-hmm. to be pulled together. A couple of fellows from Ottawa. Wilf Eagle was the fellow I was dealing with. A great guy. He was, so many businesses got incubated there. Mm-hmm. And I remember the space that the River Mill is now was a bakery. And that was the space I wanted because, the view and everything else that went along with it. And I offered dinner to Wilf Eagle at our house to come over, and I said, "Is there anything you don't like?" And he said, "I don't like curry." I said, "Okay, cool." And made this whole dinner, and I have this curry sauce that I make for vegetables, and he's chowing through his vegetables with the curry sauce on. I said, "What is this?" I said, "It's a curry sauce." And he looked at me, he said, "Okay, anybody that can get meaty curry must know what the hell they're doing." And he paid to move the bakery, and that was what happened to River Mill. Mm-hmm. And it was a great incubation, but we opened up. I was told that I would be bankrupt in 3 months. No one would come down there. I mean, the junkyard was still down there, and it was immediate success. Mm-hmm. I mean, we were doing two and a half turns at lunch and dinner 6 days a week. My wife and I were both working it. We had 3 young kids. My youngest daughter spent a lot of time down there, and I was 100 hours a week, and Laurie was 55, and that's why we were all there only for a year, because we realized it wasn't a lifestyle for our family. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't right.
Just too much. Yeah.
So we sold and did very well in the sale because of the reputation, and built in their family home out in Collins Bay, Clark's by the Bay.
That was the next restaurant.
That was the next one, and allowed us the ability to do that. I mean, the water line was a half-inch water line, and the septic was, let's say, not an improved septic system. And then we put in a football field of septic system and an inch and a half of water line, and presto bozo, a little bit more. We were open as Clark's by the Bay.
And then the next stop was Clark's on King.
Correct. We did Clark's by the Bay for 8.5 years, and it was very successful. We did lots of recognition and awards. But it was tuxedo service, and it was getting a little stiff, and I wanted to relax a bit with everyone. So we just closed it, and we were front page of the Week Standard, which was funny, And eventually the space came available for Clark's on King. And the front I was able to see, and the back, and Richard Sillis owned it at the time. So he and I were discussing, and I said, "Can I see the back part?" And he said, "Sure." And had this little impish grin on his face, and we have to make an appointment because there's somebody in there at the moment. So we went in, and a big smile came across his face as scantily clad ladies opened the door, and for me to discover that there is an escort service in Kingston, or a massage parlor, I should say. And I was like, golly, like the folks on Gomer Pyle. I was like, seriously? So anyway, that was, we did that, and we opened up. And that was 6 years, and that went very well. Again, until I went for my stress test, and my blood pressure was 238 over 118 at a certain point. It was just like, I got back to the restaurant, and Kim Donovan had bought it, and he said, "Clark, I need to redo all the mortar in the building. It's all falling out, so I'll work around you, or I'll buy you out of your lease." And I thought, well, this is serendipitous. Mm-hmm. So we sold, moved out, and that's when the Aqua people came a-calling, and we had a little frank discussion. I said, "Look, I got a little bit of pressure situation I better take care of, so I'm not going to buy or release, but I'll fix,
Yeah.
And
this is Aqua Terra.
This is Aqua Terra.
Yeah.
And over the next 12 years, we turned it into quite the going concern, and did very well. But again, it was one of those things like, okay, now it's time to do something a little bit different. Get back to my roots. So that's when we moved back to Bayview Farm, and did a small 30-seat, but dinner only 5 days a week. Mm-hmm. And it was lovely. I mean, it was a great time. But again, it was retirement was beckoning me, and I sort of wanted to spend some time with my grandkids and my children.
You get to that particular point where it's time.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Okay.
It was a great run.
We talked a little bit about the Bayview Farm and the fact that you established a restaurant in your home, essentially. Tell us a little bit about the history of that place.
So I'm 7 generations in the house. I mean, it was built by my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, basically. And they came up from the United Emperor Louis, came up from the States, and were given plots of land farther north. But I think they got up there and realized they didn't want to open a gravel pit. They wanted to try and farm it. So they came back, and they bought this mile square. It's actually part of the legal description in the area, from Reverend Stewart. And they have, all 3 of those limestone houses are family homes at some point, and still basically in the family. Bob Kennedy owns one, and his ex-wife owns the other. And but this house was originally built in 1831, Ontario Classic. But my grandparents and great-grandparents had it as a lodge in the early 1900s. So it was Bayview, was Loyalist Lodge for about 20-some years. There was a dance hall across the road, right on the water, boathouse. But it was funny because their business card said, "All food served on our table, grown on our farm," mm-hmm. which goes right back to what everybody's target is nowadays, to use as much local as possible.
I'm looking at this particular establishment erected in 1831, I think you said it was.
Yep.
So at some point when you decided to recreate the restaurant there for Bayview Farm, I imagine you had to do some renos to accommodate the restaurant.
Well, most of it was already in place from Clark's by the Bay.
Okay.
Because just a smaller portion of when we had Clark's by the Bay, it was the whole main floor of the house. We lived on the 2nd and 3rd floor. And
how many seats when it was Clark's by the Bay?
It was 65.
Okay. So
basically less than half. And we utilized the new addition, which is built in 1845. And it was, so the kitchen and everything was in place. So it was mostly cosmetics. Not a lot of. We had to do a couple of change some bathrooms around, but other than that, there wasn't a lot of extra work. And I've never changed the footprint of the house. Basically, I've kept the walls where they are, and we've lived within the parameters of the house.
So now that you've closed Bayview Farm Restaurant, you're still living in that house.
Absolutely, they're going to take me out to feet first.
When you, I would imagine that over the course of the many years that you've been working in a kitchen, you have run into a lot of new people that you've trained.
There's been a number of people over the years that we've worked with, and Jack Francis was one of the fellows that worked with me for years at River Mill in Clarks by the Bay and Clarks on King. He's a great guy. I mean, just he's now has his own business as well, Jack the Happy Chef, and he's been doing catering now for quite a few years. And but straight up nice fellow that knows how to cook brilliantly. So, and then there's some younger people that I've worked with, and some have been a good experience, and some have been,
not so good.
A learning experience for both of us.
When it comes to talking to people who are just starting out, what sorts of general bits of advice do you pass along?
Are you sure?
That wasn't what you said before we started recording.
It's one of those businesses that it has to be a lifestyle. I mean, you really have to embrace it fully. It's not one where you can go in at 8 o'clock in the morning and leave at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and expect everything to go normal. It's a constant state of fixing and making sure everything is right and dealing with, because basically you take the raw material and you process it to the point of the finished product. So there's a lot of steps involved and a lot of people involved.
Some restaurants have a theme where they use a particular style of cooking, and I read somewhere where you are a fan of the business of amalgamating as many cultures as you can when you're putting together a menu. Fair
well,
statement?
That's always the big art. Art is fusion. I mean, people say, "Oh, fusion is wrong." It should be Italian or it should be Thai. Well, we're a country of fusion. I mean, that's who we are. We've amalgamated so many different styles and cultures, and food does work by mixing it up a bit. And I've had a really great time. I love Mediterranean style cuisine, and I love Asian. I love Thai. I love the complexity of the spices in Indian food. So, I mean, there's so many things that you can work with and have fun. I mean, one of the dishes on the Bayview Farm menu was a maple syrup and garam masala marinated duck breast with udon noodles in a coconut broth with lime leaf and lemongrass and galangal, and for people who are like, "Oh, that's a lot," but it's sold beautifully, and people were like, "Wow,"
Who would have thought? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's one of those things that, and yet there was other items that were very classic.
Couple of quick questions I want to get in before we run out of time. What would you say would be your favorite go-to comfort food if you were cooking something?
Interesting. People always sometimes ask me the question, "What is your favorite meal?" And I'll say the next one, because it's always. I think we talk about the idea of recipes not being particularly fond. I like to take really fresh product and make something with that. So if I find a great Napa cabbage, if I find some amazing pork loin, if I find, fresh Brussels sprouts or whatever, and adapt those to the meal. So I must admit, I think you'll hear a lot of chefs say the same thing. A really good hamburger makes my face smile. Being brought up in Switzerland, cheese fondue is one of my favorite go-tos, but not just bread. I mean, there's pear and apple, and we've dipped shrimp in there, we've dipped ham in there, so there's
just about anything.
There's just about anything you want. If it works with cheese, you can put it on a fork and dip it in cheese. But I love Asian, I love Indian. So just last night, I did a Chinese style. It worked out quite well, actually. And the funny thing was, there's folks up in near Westport that make a maple vinegar. Maple, and it's brilliant. So it gives that sweetness without adding just white sugar, and gives a little bit of acidity to food. And it's like, Yeah, there's so much. And I think that the other part of the passion is finding your local suppliers.
Right.
It's really important for us to start supporting our local farmers. The market on Sunday at the Memorial Center, is all, you have to be producing it or preparing it. There's the Enright Farms in Tweed that we bought from. There's the farmers, Patchwork Gardens, and Brian Burt and his wife Ruth out at Burt's Greenhouses that are producing year-round. And then all the other small farms in Picton in the area, all the local wineries, all the local breweries. There's just so much that we can do, eat and drink. Mm-hmm. People will travel and go, oh, it was so fabulous. We were in Italy, we ate from the area, and and then they come back and they buy at Loblaws. Like, seriously?
Now that you are retired, what do you do to occupy your time now?
Well, there's been not much time so far. I mean, I immediately my son and I went to France and Italy. It was a great gift from him that we flew into Paris and then from Paris to Venice. So quite amazingly, we were out of there by January 28th, just before everything really got started. And then while I was over there, I got a call to see if I want to do some consulting at a university in London, Ontario. And it was just to sort of make the good program they had in place already even better and come up with some interesting ideas. And so who knows what the next phone call may or may not be, but they're always kind of interesting. But with the old house, we still have 15 acres, and spring is coming, so I know there'll be a few chores that my wife has ready for me, and we just sort of
the list is ready.
It's a big property, and so we've got 100 trees coming. We're very big on planting trees every year, so we're going to make sure we plant some more trees.
That'd be good. We have run out of time on the program, and I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I thank you for taking the time to come in.
Well, Dave, thanks for having me. It's been a riot.
Theme music for the program is Stasis Oasis, a tune written and performed by Kingston musician Tim Aylesworth. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions about any of our episodes, please send a note to the Kingstonian Podcast Facebook page. This is Dave Cunningham from Kingston, Ontario. Thank you for listening. Until next time.